the dead of winter, 1856, deep in the backwoods of southeastern Ohio, 3 infant boys came into the world under circumstances so uncanny that even today specialists whisper their names behind closed doors. They weren't born in a hospital or a home, but in the hidden cellar of a modest Quaker meeting house on one of the most perilous nights in Underground Railroad history. From the moment they drew their first breath, these triplets exhibited gifts that defied every rule of mind and body. For more than a century, their descendants have sworn silence, guarding truths so unsettling they'd shatter our understanding of human perception. What I'm about to reveal has never surfaced beyond private family ledgers, never appeared in any medical journal, and never passed through academic review. The evidence was meticulously erased. But tonight, you'll see the truth at last. Before we descend into this shadowy chronicle, born in America's most secretive rescue network, I must ask, do you possess the courage to face mysteries that blur the line between recorded fact and unexplainable phenomenon? This channel isn't meant for the faint-hearted. Only those who seek to question everything they've been taught should stay. If that's you, hit subscribe now, then drop a comment with the state you're watching from. I want to know where my fellow truth seekers are hiding tonight, because this story didn't happen in a far-off land, but right here, perhaps closer than you think. Our tale begins on a bone-chilling February eve, when 3 fragile lives emerged in the unlikeliest of sanctuaries, setting in motion a series of events that baffled doctors and scientists for generations. Cedar Mills, Ohio in 1856 could barely claim the title of town. With fewer than 300 souls, it consisted of a handful of wooden shacks, a single general store, a lone blacksmith's forge, and the plain brick meat house of the Society of Friends. Unlike their more vocal neighbors, the Quakers here worshipped with quiet robes and solemn voices, driven by the radical conviction that every life is equal in God's eyes. That belief transformed their humble meeting hall into Station 14 on the Underground Railroad, a critical refuge for freedom seekers fleeing Kentucky and Virginia. Elder Samuel Whitmore, hands calloused by decades of plowing the fields, eyes steeled with secrets that could unnerve the bravest, had overseen this covert operation for nearly 8 years. Beneath the creaking floorboards lay a cellar carved by hand over months of clandestine toil. It ran the full length of the building, supported by stout oak beams. Fresh air snaked down through hollow fence posts disguised as decoration, breathing life into the refugees huddled below. On any given week, 3 to 15 souls might find sanctuary here, some for a single night, others for weeks, waiting for their path northward. February of 1856 proved more treacherous than most. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 had given slave catchers free rein. They prowled through Ohio with legal power to seize human property. Professional hunters like the notorious Garrett brothers had been seen in the area for weeks, dangling rewards for any tip on Underground Railroad activity. In Cedar Mills, the tension was so thick you could taste it. Every knock after dark, every strange footstep on the porch, every creak in the floorboards might herald capture. It was against this backdrop of fear that a young woman arrived at the meeting house 3 days earlier. She called herself Ruth, said she was 19, and her belly was heavy with child. When Samuel Whitmore saw her swollen form, he knew she wouldn't make the journey north. What he couldn't have imagined was how soon that child would come, and how much its birth would upend everything they believed about human nature. Ruth claimed a plantation in northern Kentucky as home. She spoke with careful diction, a sign she'd learned to read, rare for someone in her situation, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that even the solemn Quakers admired. But there was something else about her, an unsettling gift. She sensed footsteps long before anyone heard them. She refused food later found to be spoiled, even though it looked fresh, and worst of all, she would sometimes meet your gaze and correct your words, never angrily, but with the calm certainty of someone who simply knew better. On her second night, she whispered to Samuel's wife, Martha, "The man who brought supplies yesterday, He said his name was Williams and that he came from Lancaster. Martha frowned. But he's lying, Ruth said softly. He's never been to Lancaster. Martha dismissed it as the ramblings of a frightened pregnant woman until, 2 days later, they discovered the man's real identity, a spy sniffing out their secret station. Then came February 23rd, 1856, a night colder than most. Samuel was leading evening prayers when 3 faint taps sounded at the door. Pause, then 2 more. The agreed signal, but something felt wrong. Samuel lifted the heavy beam. A man stumbled in. Joshua, someone Samuel had guided north before. But Joshua's calm was gone, replaced by barely contained panic. "They're coming," he gasped. Breath turned to mist in the frigid air. "The Garrett brothers, and at least 6 more, with dogs. They know about this place. Someone talked." He glanced at the trapdoor. "They're maybe 2 hours behind me, maybe less." Samuel felt his blood turn to ice. For 8 years, the meeting house had never faced a threat this direct. Its plain walls and the Quakers' reputation for integrity had always kept danger at bay, but if the Garretts were closing in with bloodhounds and precise knowledge of the hidden cellar, betrayal was a grim certainty. Their first priority was evacuation. 7 freedom seekers huddled below, among them Ruth, whose labor pains had flickered on and off all day. Martha Whitmore had watched her closely, praying the birth would wait at least another week. Yet Mother Nature showed no mercy. A low moan trembled up from the straw-strewn floorboards. Martha's face went ashen. "Samuel," she whispered, voice barely steady. "It's time. Right now." Above, Samuel and 2 others guided the other 6 fugitives through the secret north tunnel, an earthen passage that spilled out into a tangle of oaks a quarter-mile away. Meanwhile, Martha and her daughter Rebecca descended into the cramped, candlelit space to meet Ruth's labor. What they found defied every midwife's rulebook. Ruth lay perfectly still, eyes closed, breathing measured. No cries, no clenched fists. With each contraction, she simply listened, as if tuning into a sound only she could hear. "How many?" Martha asked, pressing her palm gently to Ruth's rounded belly. Ruth's eyes fluttered open, glowing in the dim light. "3, she said calmly. 3 boys. They've been waiting for tonight." Triplets were rare. Triplets born in a secret basement under the nose of slave catchers was beyond imagination, but Ruth's serene certainty and her claim that unborn children could wait sent a chill deeper than any winter wind. Hooves thundered outside. Samuel's voice grated down the stairwell. "They've arrived. Tunnel's clear, but we can't move Ruth." What happened next is recorded in Martha Whitmore's private journal, hidden for over a century until its discovery in 2003. She wrote that the moment the hounds bayed, Ruth's labor surged in total silence. No screams, no gasp of pain. The first boy slipped into the world with only Ruth's soft breathing as witness. Martha caught him and froze. He was already breathing, eyes wide and paused and alert. Before she could sever the cord, the second boy arrived, again in perfect silence, already breathing, already aware. The third appeared less than a minute later, completing what Martha would later call the most unnatural natural birth I have ever witnessed. But even that miracle paled beside what came next. Footsteps thudded across the floorboards mere feet above the newborns. The Garrett brothers had breached the meeting house and were searching every corner. Heavy boots creaked over the trapdoor that hid the cellar entrance. All the while, the infants lay, utterly silent. No cry, no whimper, not even the soft gurgles of a typical newborn. They remained motionless in Ruth's arms, their identical dark eyes tracking every shadow above. Ruth never faltered. According to Martha's journal, she cradled her 3 sons and whispered to them in a tongue Martha could not place, words that flowed like water over stones, soft and ceaseless, a song only the children could understand. The search dragged on for nearly 3 hours. The Garretts worked with ruthless precision, prodding walls, rifling through cupboards, and unleashing their dogs against the foundation. The hounds scratched and sniffed at every crack, but they never discovered the hidden stairwell. Eventually, cursing their informant, they stomped away into the night, convinced they'd been led astray. Only when the hoofbeats had faded completely did the silence finally break. In perfect unison, all three infants let out a single echoing wail, a haunting chorus that seemed to reverberate from the very beams of the cellar. Within the hour, Ruth was lost to bleeding that defied even Martha's seasoned skill. Her final words, uttered so faintly Martha had to lean in close, were, "They'll know things. They'll always know. Take care of them. But remember, they're not like other children." Ruth's death left the Quakers of Cedar Mills with a dilemma. Three fatherless infants, born free on Ohio soil, but unrecorded by any law. There were no papers, no witnesses, no legal claim to their status. Samuel Whitmore made a decision that would define their lives. The community would become their family. Each household would care for the boys in turn, sharing meals, shelter, and the responsibility of their upbringing. In the Quaker tradition, they were named Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac. From their earliest days, Martha Whitmore, who oversaw their first year, noticed oddities too precise to dismiss as chance. She documented every strange occurrence in a leather-bound journal, the boys' uncanny foresight, their silent understanding of danger, and other unsettling talents that hinted at powers far beyond any ordinary child. These notes, rediscovered alongside Martha's birth account in 2003, would be the first written testament to the triplets' inexplicable gifts. At 6 months, the triplets began exhibiting a habit that chilled even the most seasoned Quaker caregivers. At the exact same instant, whether in the kitchen, the meeting room, or on the front porch, they would jerk their heads toward a doorway or window where no one stood. Minutes later, someone would appear there, a freedom seeker terrified, an informant desperate, or a stranger hiding some darker truth. The boys sensed emotional unrest long before any warning sign reached human ears. By their first birthday, their reputation was undeniable. They could detect falsehood with unerring precision. When spoken to, they responded cheerfully to honest words, but turned away, refusing contact if even the smallest lie slipped past. At first, neighbors found it quaint, a forgotten chore. The boys called it out, a visitor's false name. They grew restless and fled the room. Yet this gift was far more profound than simple lie detection. As they matured, the triplets seemed to perceive hidden intentions, buried grievances, and unspoken plans. Samuel Whitmore noted in a private letter, "It is as if these children peer directly into the human heart and know every secret it harbors. Were it not so sorrowful to witness their distress, it might be deemed a blessing. But to them, every deception is a burden." Their sensitivity proved more than theoretical during a merchant's brief stay. A man named Thompson arrived, claiming business in Columbus. From the moment he crossed the threshold, the boys writhed in agitation, unable to eat or rest until he departed. 2 weeks later, Thompson was arrested for murdering his partner, whose body had lain hidden in that very wagon. By age 3, the community spoke of the knowing look, a silent ritual where all three would swivel their heads in perfect unison, eyes locked on someone harboring a grave secret. During these moments, they murmured to one another in that same fluid tongue Ruth had used at their birth. Dr. William Harrison, who examined them for the Medical College of Ohio, confessed in a letter, "I find no physical anomaly to explain their uncanny insight. Their senses appear normal, perhaps slightly keener, but nothing should allow such knowledge. I can only conclude they possess some unknown perceptive faculty, or that I am the dupe of some extraordinary deception." How 3-year-old children could sustain such a ruse defied all reason. Almost overnight, the triplets became living legends across the Underground Railroad. Word of their uncanny gifts spread in whispers from station to station, and freedom seekers began requesting Cedar Mills by name. knowing that those three silent boys could sniff out infiltrators with terrifying precision. The presence of Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac turned the meeting house cellar into the safest haven in Ohio. If the boys lay still and serene, fugitives dared cross that threshold. But the moment the triplets stiffened or refused to enter, it spelled betrayal. Someone in the group carried lies or danger. Samuel Whitmore found himself entrusting the security of one of the railroad's most vital stations to three toddlers, but their track record was undeniable. Over the next 3 years, the boys exposed 7 hidden threats, each time averting disaster. Yet every revelation came at a cost. As their reputation grew, so too did their isolation. Other children recoiled from their relentless, synchronized glances. Even the most upright adults squirmed beneath the boys' unblinking scrutiny, feeling their innermost thoughts laid bare. Worse still was the triplets' dawning self-awareness. By age 4, they learned to temper their ominous gazes around strangers and to whisper their consultations more softly. But this control only drove them further from normal childhood, an invisible barrier erected by knowledge no other soul could bear. Then came 1860, and with it a storm even the triplets hadn't faced. Abraham Lincoln's election ignited fury across the state. Federal marshals prowled the countryside, and bounty hunters, Garrett's among them, operated with brazen impunity. It was in this crucible of fear that the boys revealed a new, darker talent, the ability to sense anguish in souls far beyond Cedar Mills. On a bitter January morning, the triplets erupted in a single keening wail that neither soothed nor ceased. They lay huddled by the hearth, tears streaming, while their caregivers tried every lullaby and blessing to no avail. For nearly 6 relentless hours, that sound carried the weight of terror and desperation. Then, as dusk fell, the boys stilled. 2 days later, a ragged freedom seeker stumbled in with grim news. 11 fugitives, 3 of them children, had been captured by slave catchers 40 miles to the south. The triplets' distress, it seemed, had been a warning across the miles, a warning that came too late. And so the 3 silent sentinels of Cedar Mills faced their greatest trial yet. Could their gifts save lives beyond the confines of that humble meeting house, or would the widening danger swallow even their keenest senses? The moment the triplets' anguished cries began, a group of freedom seekers was being seized 40 miles south, an almost exact echo of their distress. Worse still, among those captured was a heavily pregnant woman who had given birth during the ambush. Both mother and newborn succumbed to the freezing journey back to Kentucky. Samuel Whitmore was shaken, but chalked it up to tragic coincidence, until 3 weeks later, when the boy's agony returned. Briefer yet fiercer. The next day brought word that a conductor had been gunned down near Portsmouth at the very instant the triplets had erupted in terror. Alarmed, Dr. William Harrison examined the brothers after a third such episode. His private notes reveal physiology beyond explanation. Their pulses locked in perfect unison, breaths rising and falling as one, body temperatures plunging several degrees, even their brainwaves spiking with intense activity. Despite no apparent injury, they were unmistakably reacting to trauma worlds away. Harrison wrote, "I can only surmise their nervous systems detect profound emotional peril at great distances, a phenomenon wholly unknown to medical science." Their uncanny gift proved frighteningly selective. The boys never stirred for accidents or natural deaths, only for betrayal, pursuit, or murder, and their reach seemed to span all of southern and central Ohio, and perhaps into northern Kentucky. Word of their prowess slipped beyond underground railroad circles, drawing families desperate for answers about lost loved ones. Though Samuel Whitmore bristled at the thought of exploiting the children, the boys themselves gravitated toward these sorrowing strangers. The most astonishing appeal came from the Brennans, a family whose 16-year-old daughter, Mary, had vanished en route to Columbus. 3 months had passed with no trace, until the parents appeared at Cedar Mills, clutching rumors of 3 boys who could find the lost. Samuel hesitated, but before he could refuse, Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac approached the weeping Mrs. Brennan. Without prompting, they fell silent, synchronized, whispering in that same flowing tongue their mother had used at their birth. Then Isaac stepped forward, arm outstretched, pointing southeast, toward the winding path of the Ohio River. "She's there," he said simply. "She's scared, but she's alive." Acting on the Triplets Council, local authorities scoured a secluded farm near Chillicothe and discovered Mary Brennan locked in a dank cellar alongside 2 other kidnapped young women. The abductor, posing as a preacher, was arrested and later admitted he'd planned to sell them into New Orleans slavery. That rescue forever altered Cedar Mills' view of Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac. No longer were they mere lie detectors. They had become something far more unsettling. Their powers intensified month by month, with no apparent ceiling to their reach or precision. Yet their gift came at a harrowing cost. The boys grew increasingly detached. They rarely smiled or played, preferring to huddle together in hushed conferences of that strange, flowing language. When they did speak to adults, their voices carried a gravity and sorrow utterly foreign to children their age. Dr. William Harrison's final notes, penned shortly before his death in 1862, are chilling. "I fear we're witnessing the emergence of humans fundamentally unlike the rest of our species. Their abilities expand with time, and I dread what they may achieve as they mature. They absorb more human suffering and malice than most endure in a lifetime, yet they possess none of our emotional defenses. What kind of men will they become, men apart, forever isolated by their terrible knowledge?" The Civil War's outbreak in 1861 only magnified their talents. As Union and Confederate forces clashed along the border, the boys reacted in ways no adult could comprehend. One sweltering summer week, the 6-year-olds stood at the meeting house windows, eyes locked on the Ohio River, faces etched with horror. When Samuel Whitmore pressed them, Isaac whispered, "Too many people are going to die." 3 days later came news of the Union's crushing defeat at Bull Run. Similar premonitions followed, emotional storms that foreshadowed battles days or weeks before word reached Cedar Mills, even the presence of individual soldiers among the masses. In September 1861, a young Union soldier named Thomas Caldwell stopped at the meeting house while traveling home on leave to visit his family in Marietta. The moment the triplets laid eyes on him, their voices dropped to that familiar synchronized whisper, and their faces contorted with grief. Martha Whitmore, now well into her 60s, yet still their steadfast guardian, bent to ask what they sensed about the young soldier. Ezra, stepping forward with an eerie calm, spoke in a tone far beyond his years. "He won't make it home. 3 days from now, by the river crossing, the man he trusts will turn his gun on him, for money." Thomas Caldwell laughed it off, insisting he traveled alone and carried nothing of value. But 3 days later, his body was found near a ford 20 miles east, shot and robbed by a deserter named Patterson, who'd posed as his friend. The prediction's pinpoint accuracy sent shockwaves through Cedar Mills. Yet that was only the beginning. Over the ensuing months, the boys foretold deaths down to the very hour, unmasked betrayals before a whisper was heard, and even foretold which fugitives would slip through to Canada and which would be caught or slaughtered along the way. Samuel Whitmore wrestled with conscience. Should he act on what the boys revealed? Warn people of their fate? Or was such knowledge too perilous to share? All the while, the triplets regarded these tragedies with detached curiosity, reciting grim prophecies as if commenting on the weather. Spring of 1862 brought their greatest test. 12 desperate souls arrived under the guidance of James Morrison, a conductor Samuel had trusted for years. But the instant Morrison crossed the threshold, the boys erupted in a scream unlike any before, a raw, animal howl that shook the rafters. They pointed at Morrison, eyes wide with terror, shouting over and over, "Death! He brings death! So much death!" Morrison, aghast and wounded, swore he'd guided them safely from Kentucky. The freedom seekers, men, women, children, showed no guile, only urgent hope. Yet the triplets' agitation only deepened. They refused to descend into the basement while Morrison and his group remained above, and their whispered consultations grew more frantic with each passing hour. Tomorrow night, by the dark bend of Miller's Creek, he will call to them, and they will answer, believing him a friend. But hidden in the trees, men with rifles will wait. Samuel Whitmore faced an impossible choice: trust 3 children whose gift he barely grasped, or gamble the lives of 12 desperate souls on what might be mere childhood instinct. In the end, he struck a tentative bargain. He allowed James Morrison to lead the fugitives onward, but sent word ahead, urging caution. He also dispatched 2 local men to trail at a distance, ready to intervene. What they witnessed that cold night would confirm the triplets' warning in the cruelest way imaginable. Morrison guided the group into a clearing by Miller's Creek, exactly as the boys had predicted. Instead of shepherding them to safety, he uttered a call into the silence. Within minutes, slave catchers erupted from the woods, guns flashing. The freedom seekers realized the betrayal too late. In the chaos that followed, 7 people, including 2 children, fell beneath the gunfire. 5 more were bound and dragged back to Kentucky in chains. Samuel's 2 watchers stood helpless on the forest's edge, too distant to save lives, yet close enough to see Morrison accept payment from the hunter's leader. The man who had vowed to guide hundreds to liberty was exposed as a traitor, selling secrets and leading his charges into ambush. When the massacre's news reached Cedar Mills, the community reeled. 7 souls were dead, 5 condemned, and their most trusted conductor was revealed as a murderer. But the deepest wound was learning that 3 7-year-olds had foreseen every horror, and nobody had heeded their plea. For the first time in years, the triplets abandoned their calm detachment. Their faces crumpled in a grief no child should know, a sorrow that ran deeper than anger or despair. "They never listen," Isaac said softly, his voice heavy with reproach. "They refuse to believe what we see. They think we are just children, but we have witnessed more death than anyone here. We know what people do when they think no one is watching." His words echoed like a verdict. Samuel realized then that Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac were no longer mere children with uncanny gifts. They had become something else entirely, beings who could peer into the darkest corners of the human heart with perfect clarity. And that terrible knowledge was reshaping them into creatures alien to mankind. Just when he believed he understood their power, it grew beyond all expectation, its depths still unfathomed. A revelation that would forever change the world's understanding of the triplets came in the brutal winter of 1863, when they turned 8, and the Civil War raged in its bloodiest fury. By the winter of 1863, Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, one of Ohio's first female physicians and a rising specialist in neurological disorders, had spent 6 months studying the triplets under the auspices of the Medical College of Ohio. Her fascination was sparked by Dr. Harrison's final reports, and she persuaded Samuel Whitmore to permit a full medical examination of Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac. What she uncovered would shatter every assumption about human perception. Using the most advanced instruments of the day, Dr. Hartwell documented brain anatomies unlike anything in medical literature. The boys' cerebral cortices pulsed with hyperactive signals in regions tied to pattern recognition and emotional processing. More astonishingly, electrodes placed on one boy would provoke instantaneous physiological responses in the other two, even when they occupied separate rooms. Their heartbeats, breaths, and brain waves rose and fell in perfect unison during focus tests, suggesting a shared consciousness spread across 3 bodies. Her deception trials proved even more incredible. Volunteers recited truths and lies while the boys watched. Dr. Hartwell measured their skin currents, pulse, and nerve responses. She found that the triplets weren't merely reading faces or tone. They were sensing subtle fluctuations in the electromagnetic fields generated by human thought. Each lie, each flicker of fear, emitted a distinct neural signature that the boys detected as surely as we see colors or hear sounds. These children possess a biological electromagnetic sensitivity, Dr. Hartwell wrote in her classified report, enabling them to perceive the raw electrical activity of another mind. This revelation explained not only their lie detection and long-distance distress sensing, but also their uncanny foresight of violent events. Yet her findings posed an even darker question. If these abilities sprang from a genetic mutation, what had catalyzed such an evolutionary leap? The answer lay buried in tissue samples from their mother, Ruth, her remains interred in the Meeting House Cemetery, awaiting the scrutiny that would redefine human possibility. According to Quaker custom, when Ruth's remains were exhumed for study, the findings stunned everyone. Her body bore massive levels of the same mercury compounds and lead-based pigments used in southern indigo plantations. Those poisons had ravaged her nervous system, but in her unborn sons, they ignited an unprecedented genetic shift. Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac were living proof of an evolutionary leap. A mutation that elsewhere would have been lethal, here granting sensory powers beyond any known human capacity, evidence that consciousness itself could evolve in ways science had never dreamed. Dr. Hartwell's final revelation proved even more chilling. Her genetic analysis confirmed these electromagnetic sensitivities were dominant traits, guaranteed to pass to the triplets' children and grandchildren. "We stand at the threshold of a new human branch," she wrote in her most confidential notes. "Within 3 generations, their descendants may perceive thoughts and emotions as plainly as colors or sounds, leaving ordinary humanity feeling primitive by comparison." The implications were both breathtaking and terrifying. With the Civil War raging, Union and Confederate leaders alike would covet such talents for espionage and interrogation. Samuel Whitmore faced a cruel dilemma: allow Dr. Hartwell to publish and shield the boys under public scrutiny, or suppress the research, protecting their privacy, yet exposing them to secret forces already aware of their gifts. Before he could decide, that choice was made for him. On a bitter February morning, federal marshals descended on Cedar Mills with orders to escort the triplets to Washington for matters of national security. Someone high in the military had unearthed Dr. Hartwell's report and judged the boys too valuable to remain hidden. But the triplets had sensed their approach long before the marshals knocked. When Samuel found them that dawn, they stood with their few belongings bundled in cloth sacks, their eyes calm and certain. "We have to go," Caleb said simply. "If we stay, bad things will happen to everyone here. We've seen it." Isaac nodded gravely. "They're not coming to protect us," the boys said in unison, voices low and urgent. "They want to pry us open, dissect our minds, then return for our children, and their children." Ezra, always the quietest, stepped forward. "We've seen the future they envision. A world where people like us are caged and exploited. We refuse to let that happen. Their decision was instant and irrevocable. Long before the federal marshal's hoofbeats reached Cedar Mills, the triplets vanished into the labyrinth of hidden caves and backwoods trails that crisscrossed the hills. Samuel Whitmore made one last plea, arguing they'd be safer under government guard than exposed to the elements. Caleb's reply was calm, yet carried the weight of 10 lifetimes. Mr. Whitmore, we sense every intention within 50 miles. Those men won't shield us, they'll possess us. We know their thoughts. We'd rather risk the wild than end up prisoners in a laboratory. As distant horses thundered across the frozen fields, the boys readied their few belongings. Before slipping into the woods, they left Samuel with their final, haunting revelation. "There are others," Isaac whispered. "Not many, but some. Children born in violence, whose mothers drank the same poisons that changed us. They scatter across the land, unaware of what they are, yet we can feel them, and they feel us." Ezra's young face bore an ageless resolve. "One day, when it's safe, we'll find them. We'll teach them our truths, guide them in their gifts. Perhaps together we can build a world where deception cannot hide, and evil has nowhere to hide its face." Their last words, a promise and a warning. "We'll be watching, always. We'll remember who helped us and who betrayed us, and that knowledge will pass to our children and theirs until the world itself changes." 3 hours later, the marshals reached the meeting house. They found only empty rooms and the faint imprint of 3 extraordinary lives that had dissolved into the Ohio wilderness. Despite hounds, search parties, and military patrols, no sign of Caleb, Ezra, or Isaac was ever uncovered. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell's report was classified at once by military command, its revelations sealed for over 60 years. When finally declassified in 1924, it ignited a firestorm in medical circles, but any chance to study the triplets in person had long since vanished. They would be nearly 70 years old by then. Samuel Whitmore lived on until 1889, guarding his secret to the end. In journals found after his death, he confessed, "I have glimpsed humanity's future, and it both terrifies and inspires me." Those 3 boys were something new under the sun, capable of propelling our species to heights unimagined or plunging us into abyssal ruin. May they always recall the love and mercy of our humble haven. Cedar Mills Underground Railroad Station remained open until the Civil War's end, but the loss of the triplets left it vulnerable. Without their uncanny vigilance, several conductors were captured or killed. By 1878, the meeting house stood abandoned and forlorn, its walls succumbing to ivy and time. Yet the triplets' story did not end with their disappearance. Over the decades that followed, whispers of uncanny perception spread across the nation. In rural Pennsylvania, a young girl warned her family of accidents days before they occurred. On a ranch in Texas, twin brothers found missing travelers hidden in the scrub with impossible precision. In a San Francisco boarding house, a child exposed every lie told within earshot, before a single word had even left someone's lips. Most dismissed these tales as fanciful folklore or overactive imaginations, but for those attuned to the pattern, the truth was unmistakable. Each gifted child had been born amid great upheaval, wars, riots, or industrial disasters, and each mother had been exposed to toxic chemicals in pregnancy. And every one of these children exhibited the same electromagnetic sensitivity first catalogued in the Cedar Mills triplets. Modern genetics has vindicated Dr. Hartwell's century-old suspicions. Extreme environmental stress combined with certain poisons can trigger rapid mutations, creating sensory abilities far beyond ordinary human limits. What was once thought an anomaly is now recognized as stress-induced evolution. A recent survey uncovered at least 47 documented cases of enhanced electromagnetic sensitivity in Americans born between 1850 and 1900, mostly in regions scarred by conflict or pollution. Yet while most of those individuals lived quiet lives and never realized the full scope of their talents, their descendants still carry those genes in their DNA. Dr. Sarah Chen, a neurologist at Johns Hopkins and a 2-decade student of human electromagnetic sensitivity, estimates that up to 0.1% of Americans today possess some degree of this gift. They're not mystics or psychics, she emphasized in a 2019 lecture. They're simply humans whose neural wiring picks up on the electrical patterns of other brains, detecting deception, hidden fear, even locating the lost. Imagine the impact on law enforcement or intelligence agencies if such people were identified and trained. Imagine what future generations might accomplish if these mutations continue to strengthen. Could we one day read another person's thoughts as easily as we watch a screen? The answer, it seems, was waiting in southeastern Ohio. In 2003, renovation crews tearing into an old farmhouse uncovered a concealed chamber, dust-choked trunks filled with letters, journals, and Dr. Hartwell's classified reports preserved for more than a century. What those pages reveal could rewrite everything we know about human evolution and warn us what lies ahead. Among the dust-covered trunks, one fragile envelope stood out, a letter dated 1923, penned in 3 distinct hands, but signed with a single name. The Children of Cedar Mills. Show a close-up of the yellowed parchment inside, lay detailed family trees, tracing the descendants of Caleb, Ezra, and Isaac, proof that the boys had survived their 1863 disappearance, lived full lives, and fathered children who inherited their extraordinary gifts. The letter went on to reveal chilling predictions written decades before they occurred. The exact start and end dates of both world wars overlay black and white footage of WWE trenches and Wubby-Woo battlefields. The location and date of the first atomic bomb test cut to grainy bomb test footage, the year of the moon landing pan across archival lunar photographs, and dozens of other world-changing events yet to come. It concluded with a vow that both comforted and unsettled historians. We are still here. We are still watching. With each generation we grow in number and in power. When the world needs us, we will be ready. Until then, we remain hidden, learning, growing, preparing for our moment. Pause. Let silence settle. Attached was an address in rural Ohio and a simple directive. Come here on the anniversary of our birth. We will be waiting. So on February 23rd, 2024, their 168th birthday, over 50 souls converged at that unmarked farmhouse. Researchers, descendants of Underground Railroad heroes, and people who claimed the same uncanny intuitions. What happened that night remains a secret. None of the attendees will speak of it, and no records exist. Yet in the months since, several have joined forces, tackling cold cases, aiding criminal investigations, and pioneering new studies in human perception. Dr. Sarah Chen, who stood among that mysterious gathering, will only say this: the legacy of the Cedar Mills triplets is far from over. In fact, it may be just beginning. The tale of 3 boys born in a hidden basement and the astonishing lineage they spawned continues to unfold more than 160 years later. Could these descendants be humanity's next evolutionary leap, or its greatest vulnerability? What do you think? Could extreme hardship have fast-tracked human evolution? Have you ever felt an intuition so precise it felt impossible? Share your thoughts below. If this story stirred your imagination and you crave more mysteries that blur the line between science and the uncanny, subscribe now, ring the notification bell, and share with a friend who loves the unexplained. Fade to black. See you in the next video, where we'll uncover another dark secret hidden in America's past.